I am Silas Munro. I live in Inglewood, California, which is in Los Angeles. I teach down the road at Otis College of Art and Design, and then I teach across the country, also at Vermont College of Fine Arts. At Otis, it's grad students and undergrads. I just started teaching design history as well. And then at VCFA, it's grad only. In addition to my teaching practice, I run a studio called Polymode, and you're in it. This is my studio. It used to be the greenhouse behind the house that we live in,
which was made by who?
The house was designed by Rudolf Schindler. It was built between 1938 and 1940, but the greenhouse was added in 1964 as part of a renovation in which both my husband, Bill, and I don't agree with a lot of things they did. They added a second bathroom, which is nice, but they fucked up a lot of his windows. Like, he and his draftsman who built the houses, there's a series of 3 in our neighborhood, and there used to be an empty plot between our house and the other 2 houses. They just kind of Schindler thought a lot about the relationship between light and space, and the houses are similar but different, and he was making decisions in situ as he was like building them. And it was some of the first buildings using poured concrete, which was like a technique that he innovated. But they just, I don't know, it's not the same. So we'd love to like restore some aspects of it, if we could. Origin story. So this is funny because like when I host workshops, I often ask people to tell the origin story of their name. So I can do that for you. So my full name is Neil Silas Munro. 2 of the names come from my dad's side and 2 come from my mom's side. So I was born in Northern Virginia, a suburb of DC. Reston is kind of where I grew up, but Fairfax, Virginia is where I was born. Neil is my grandfather on my dad's side. He's from Minnesota. It's an Irish-Scottish name, which means the champion. And then Munro is a Scottish surname. There's a clan, a tartan, a castle. So they're Scottish through the Midwest. And then Silas and Munabi come from my mom's side. Munabi is a family name from my mom's side. My grandfather, Kwadu Munabi, it's his family name, and I don't know what it means. And then Silas is a biblical name that my uncle had, which is in the New Testament, but it's also older. It's like a Greek name, and also Persian, and it means like of the forest, like Sylvan. I grew up in Northern Virginia, like the suburbs of DC, in a very diverse neighborhood called Bailey's Crossroads, where that's actually like my first encounter with graphic design. Was the flyers that would come from the school would be in like 7 or 8 languages. We had like English and Spanish and Farsi and, Korean, Mandarin. Like they were just a very diverse, because of DC and like diplomats being there. I was just kind of always around people from very different places.
And where is your mom from?
My mom's from Uganda, from Kampala. Well, outside of Kampala, which is the capital. She grew up on a farm there. And so my grandfather and grandmother ran the farm. My grandmother was more responsible for that. She's actually like, according to my mom, like, I don't know the Ugandan word. I don't speak any of the language that my mom spoke growing up, which is called Unyule. But she's basically like a plant witch. Like, she knew all the medicines. She was a medicine woman and like made tonics and healing things, and was a farmer, entrepreneur, would like bring things from the farm to market in town. Yeah, I think both. Some of it has to do with their culture, and I think some of it has to do with like their professions as well. My mom being an immigrant and then becoming a citizen, like I actually, as I was growing up, I watched her naturalize and like become a citizen, which was interesting. I just feel like she has such an interesting perspective on the world. She's trained as a microbiologist, but is also like where I get my visual art skills. She's always been a artist. She keeps sketchbooks. She would paint. She did a lot of photography when I was in middle school and high school. So there's that, and just like seeing the world as like a foreigner. That has a bit of a dark side because there's like some family trauma with my uncle's assassination. That's like part of that story. So there's, I think, empathy and understanding. And then from my dad's side, he's a history major. He was a journalist for NPR for 34 years. So this idea of telling stories, of listening, of also like producing something and actually making something that's an assemblage or a collage, which I think design is. Fragments of something and like making sense. He's an editor, producer by trade. That influenced me a lot. And then there's just something about like the Midwest and the heartland, and sort of all of his sisters are teachers, and so that's like a big part of my practice too. So I would say, plus they started dating at the height of the civil rights movement in the United States. And so there's this interesting narrative of like an African narrative that becomes an American and like African American narrative, which can be interesting for me because I'm like read as black, which I am, even though I'm biracial, multiracial, and more like have an African upbringing than an African American one. So that's like happened through like the experience of life and like my own study. I would describe it as polymodal. I mean, that's the name of my studio. It is definitely a term that came out of grad school. It's the name of my thesis at CalArts. It came out of sort of a practical thing because I've always been interested in a lot of different things and felt very fragmented. And so it's really about like being many shapes, forms, styles, approaches, and they kind of all come together. And for a long time it felt like they were pieces that were disconnected, but now they feel very holistic. Teaching, writing is a big part of my practice, graphic design, typography, and then now also art making is a really huge part of my practice. And I'm really excited that you're in the studio because it's like this space is finally this space that's conducive to all of those things, so it can really like flex to any of those things, and I do them all here. I think that some of that polymodalism, like a lot of that framework came through fiction and sort of like alternate identities, but I think it's not just being queer or gay, but also being biracial. Like I have a lot of experience with sort of considered from the margins or outside of society or culture.
How? Why?
Some of that has to do with like cultural ideas of like heteronormativity, of like, and also in design as like, even though design works with a lot of things, it can be kind of a monoculture in terms of who's practicing it, who has access to it. And so I like bring a kind of like invisible or like a second sight. I mean, Du Bois calls it double consciousness, but I feel like it's a second sight, where I'm just like, have always been reading the world and like needing to read the world to feel safe. And so I think that informs how I structure the classroom and like trying to create safer spaces, trying to create more unique spaces that flex to whoever is in the space. So that's why it's sort of hard to define my pedagogy a lot of times. I was saying to you, like I just won this teaching award at Otis, and there was, actually it's right here, there were some things
right on.
that, so funny, there were some things that the students wrote, and like it was great to win this award because it's like there are 3 people that win the award, part-time, a full-time, and like a lifetime achievement. This is the full-time. But like, and you get a cash prize too, which is really cool for a teacher because you don't make that much money. It really helped me out because I wasn't at VCFA, I think, at the time, or I don't know, whatever. It was really useful. And so, but there was this quote that one of these students wrote, and like there were like 12 of these, and I just like, when I read them, I like lost it, and it was just nice. Well, I'm gonna read one where I feel like it's almost as if the student actually wrote my pedagogical philosophy. So, this is what they wrote. Silas has a deep sensibility not just for the aesthetics and the meaning of design, but for the story behind. He is an empath, and it's through this empathy and his vast knowledge that he brings out the best in students. His ability to help us pause has enhanced not just my projects as an MFA, but of those of many others. And this is like key. He isn't afraid of being raw and vulnerable and approachable. It's because he's brave like this that he's a leader I want to follow. He's a teacher whose advice I seek outside the classroom. He is someone I don't want to disappoint. Silas deserves credit for reestablishing my belief in the art school system and for helping me trust my instincts. He is wonderful. So just that, like, I felt like when they wrote this, they saw me, and it like especially the part about being vulnerable and raw and approachable. Like I think that's so, that probably speaks to the being queer, like being gay, being like an other. You're vulnerable. It's funny because he supports me in a lot of ways, like just being with me and loving me. When I work late, he helps with the dogs and like making dinner and like making sure I have sleep. So he does like those very practical things. I think he also reminds me not to take design so seriously. Like he has a very different way of talking about design than I do. He's total designer. He's an aesthete. Like, we have a really beautiful home mostly because of Bill. Like, he works in the furniture industry. He has great taste. He renovated. We have a weekend place in Palm Springs. He renovated that. Like, he's just got an eye. But we kind of joke because, like, pretty much every time I show him something in design, he says, "That's cute." Like, literally. Like, that's the word he uses for it. And so, I don't know, he's like a champion of what I do, but like, we even joke about how he doesn't always feel like he understands everything I do or about design or like have the language for it, but I think that's awesome because like he actually makes my work, like, it reminds me to make it accessible, you know? Like that it's like, it's meant to communicate something. I think it's kind of maybe the only thing that matters in design. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that. Like, it's kind of what all of this is about. Like, what is considered palatable, what is considered good, what is considered bad, and I think if you take away like the tools, the form, or like, I mean, you can't take taste away from design, especially graphic design. It's like everything there is. I feel like this is a fucking essay waiting to happen. Like,
yeah, totally. I mean, like, the thing is, like, you could look at taste as like a class construct.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and it's also like.
But it's also sensory. It's like bodily awareness, and like a lot of the training that's done in design school is like giving students a sense of like how to have a taste, or even if you have a taste that's not like the mainstream or like appropriate, or finding like emerging tastes and like making it known.
Yeah.
That it's like all about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you talk about it in a way that's really non-metaphoric, it's actually about flavor. And the thing is, it's about understanding sensory stuff. So like, it's just like, I don't know, these are the different flavor combos.
Yeah, exactly. These are sour, sweet. What is that new book? Salt, Acid, Heat.
Oh yeah.
It's a Netflix show now.
Yeah.
Fat is another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like these 4 principles, and you combine them in all different ways.
Yeah, it's like salt, fire.
Salt, acid, fat, heat.
I did the identity for a company called Salt, Fire, and Time.
Oh,
so it's like I always think.
I have it, and she's amazing. She's like an amazing chef.
Yeah. My mom's always on me to watch it. Haven't done it yet. So, you also invoked the word.
But wait, do you think that means that there's recipes? Then, like, if there's taste, if it's like if design is about flavor, like.
Yeah, there are recipes, but the thing is like, that it doesn't get really good until you like get off that path. You know, like maybe there's like a base set of ingredients, but then you like twist it one way or another, and that's when it actually becomes either really good or banal. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Right, and this class thing is like, that's a lot. I call myself and have called myself a design nomad, and I have, at least in the United States, lived like a lot of places. I grew up in Virginia. I ended up going to get a BFA in graphic design at RISD in Rhode Island. After there, I worked for a year in Minneapolis at the Walker Art Center doing a fellowship in design there, which is actually where my dad's side of the family is from. So like, that was awesome. Actually, I had a Sunday routine where like I would bring my laundry from my apartment in Loring Park and bring it to my grandparents' house, which were not my biological grandparents, but my mom's host family, the Middlebrooks, in Edina, which is like home of the first shopping mall. And I would do my laundry. I would read the New York Times Magazine, which was like super cool design at that time. I think like Janet Froelich was finishing and Rem Duplessis was taking over. I would do my laundry, drink beers, take a nap, and then like watch 60 Minutes with my grandparents, and like they'd make some amazing food. From there, I lived in Chicago, worked for VSA Partners, super corporate, doing IBM stuff. So it was interesting to like the specter of Paul Rand and like uber modernism in these huge teams of work. We made really cool work, but I felt like it wasn't mine, or like I didn't have much of a role in it. So I went back to DC and freelanced for a year while I applied to grad school. And I applied to 3 places: MoCA, Yale, and CalArts. I got into all of them, and I almost went to MoCA because I had a boyfriend at the time who said he would be willing to pay for my entire schooling if I went to MoCA.
Damn.
Which was fucking stupid. In some ways, I feel like I should have done that. Just financially, like the debt I have. And it seemed like a natural choice. If you get into Yale, you should go there because it's sort of like one of the most like well-known schools. But when I went to CalArts, I felt really at home. There, I even fell asleep. Like actually, Tashika, who we teach with now, Tashika and Jessica Delana had like desks together. It was a bench. I like fell asleep on the bench. But the other reason why I didn't go to Yale was when I went there for my interview. After the interview, I was waiting outside for some students, and the New Haven police stopped me, and they were like, "What are you doing? Let me see your ID. Where's your train ticket?" It was fucked, and I just felt super vulnerable, exposed.
The West Coast is the best coast.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, fuck this. Like, I've since been back there, like, in different capacities as a visitor, and it's like, I've had an amazing experience. And it's a really great program and a great school, and I have a lot of respect for the people that went there. But just that whole friction between New Haven and Yale is highly problematic. Then I moved to LA. I chose CalArts. I lived in Valencia for the first year with Victor Hugh, who was a second-year student. And then I lived in Newhall the second year in this house that Carrie owned. It was like such a cool setup with these like crazy olive trees and a giant monster truck next to it. And then from there, I went to NC State, North Carolina, taught there, design in residence for a year. Then New York, oh my god, this is bad. You could tell I'm a nomad. Then went to New York, I was a design director of Housing Works. I met Bill, my husband. We lived in Miami for a few years. I lived in Ohio for a year, and now I'm in LA. Fuck, that was so long. Anyways, yes, that's where I've been.
And then from Ohio to LA.
Yeah, I came back here. I teach at Otis. It's funny because LA is like, it's so vast. It feels like home because I can just like, there's so much to explore here. Like, it's incredible. Actually, David Hockney says that about LA. It's a city where he feels the most space.
Okay.
And that's like, he told all the people in London he moved for like the sexy reasons, the boys, the sand, the surf. Yeah, I met him when I was a grad student. So my boyfriend at the time, Mark, his cousin, Thor, was the stage director of the LA Opera, and David Hockney has designed sets for the opera Tristan and Isolde, and so they were putting on a production of that, and so there was a, what do you call it, like a dress rehearsal or whatever performance, and David was there to like make sure the sets look good. So my best friend Brian, who runs Polymode with me, we met him afterwards, and he was very flirty and very cool, and he told that story about LA in space. When I was working for Lorraine Wild, Diane Keaton was hanging out at the studio.
What?
Yeah. Yes. Lorraine Wild is sort of like the book designer to the stars. I joke about that about her. I mean, no, she's just an amazing designer. But Diane Keaton does this series of books called California Romantica, which is about this sort of like Italian influence, Tuscan influenced architecture. And so at the time, this was the summer of 2007, Lorraine was designing the first version of that book, and so Diane Keaton was just like there in the studio like at least 3 or 4 times while I was working there. My favorite time she was there, she was wearing this very unique shade of purple nail polish, and Victoria Lamb at the time was like asking her like why was she wearing that color, and she told this like long-winded story, which I don't remember the name of the story, but then she was like, oh, I just felt like it. And then Lorraine told the story where she was in Provincetown with Jessica Heflin, where they were getting their nails done together, and they went to a nail salon, and the person giving Jessica her nails was either a drag queen or a trans woman. And Jessica was insisting on getting a clear coat, and the nail technician was like, honey, this is P-Town, you're getting red. And so it was just this weird combination of gayness and design and celebrity like all at once. So yeah, that would be the standout. I'm a surfer, so that's a huge reason why I would stay here. There's like the best surf in an urban context, maybe other than like Australia. I think there's a lot of possibility in Los Angeles in terms of like a practice, but also the people that are here, the institutions that are here, the conversations and schools. So I feel like it's just like got everything that I want in a city. I like the lifestyle. I like being 3 hours after New York. I have most of my clients are actually not in Los Angeles. They're on the East Coast. I'm starting to have more LA clients, but I don't know, there's just something about like, I was always a late bird. So I feel like, I don't know, I can like surf, come in, I have a business partner on the East Coast, and I don't know, it just like works. The timing of it works for my life. I don't know, I love it here.